Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be building one of the most powerful and realistic parts of our system, which is the visits module. Now, this page is going to allow us to track which patients came in, what service they received, when they visited, and what their current status is. So in this video, we're going to build the form in plain HTML first, and then we're going to integrate some PHP logic to dynamically pull in patients and services from the database. We're going to store new visits, and we're going to show everything in a beautiful table as we've done before. But in this case, we're going to be pulling information from multiple tables. So we're going to use something called SQL joins. Now, to start with, in the previous video, I had asked you to go ahead and, as a challenge, create the uh, delete service, page or delete service file, which would have been able to allow the user to delete services from the services page that we created in that video. So just in case, I really hope the challenge went well for you guys. But in case you had any difficulty, you can pause the video here. You can take a look at my code that I have here for the delete service.php. See if it makes any sense to you, if you have any changes to make or how close it is to yours. But if you got this done, then congratulations to you. You're doing absolutely well. So let's go back to our visits.php. Now, I have already pre-made my HTML setup or my HTML form and page, and I've also created my delete visits file, but I have not populated it as yet. We'll be doing that towards the end of this video. But our visits.php page is actually already built. So I have my page, which contains all of the HTML. You will notice that I have my form, which begins here. I have an input field for the ID, which is going to contain or hold the ID, which is only going to be used for updating. And these are things that we've seen before and should be very familiar to us. For the patient selection, we have a drop-down menu. And this is our select element here. And we notice that we have one option, which really is just a label for asking the user to select a patient. But you notice my comment here, which says PHP will populate this. So we're actually going to use PHP to automatically populate the drop-down list for the patient selection, which will pull information from the patients table. We're going to be pulling information using PHP from the service table, and it's going to populate the drop-down here. And also, as we've seen before in a couple of our videos, we are going to be creating or populating this table at the bottom here with rows which are going to be pulled from the relevant table. And in this case, they're going to be pulled from multiple tables. So let's see what this looks like in our web view. Okay, so right now we have our ID. We don't have any patients to be seen or services. We can put in our date. We're going to select a status of either confirmed or pending or completed. And down here is where we're going to see our beautiful table where all of our patient information from the various tables is going to be joined and shown. So let's dive right in. So to begin, we're going to have to put into our visits.php the starting of our PHP code. So I'm going to open up my PHP tags, and I am also going to close my PHP tags. And inside of here, I'm going to add some things that we may already have seen. And I'm going to do some copying and pasting here. It's okay for us to be a little lazy to save ourselves the time and the typing. So I'm going to go into my patients.php. I think that should be a good one. And copy, I'm going to copy um, my include statements for my database connection. I'm going to copy the message variable, the add a patient module, the update a patient module. So I'm going to copy all of this. I'm not as yet going to copy this at the bottom here. I think we can create our own later, but I'm going to copy all of this, okay? And then I'm going to paste it right here in my visits.php. So now we can go ahead and edit this as we want. Now, let's look at what we have. We're not adding a patient, we're actually adding a visit. We're not updating a patient here, we're actually updating a visit. And we have our connections. We know what our message variable is going to be used for. Now, as before, our message variable is going to be used to provide useful messaging to our user. So right here where my comment is that says feedback messages, success or error will go here, we can actually echo out using PHP shorthand our message variable. So anything we put in our message variable is going to be echoed out right here in our form, or sorry, just above our form, not in our form. So let's go back up to adjust what we need to adjust for adding a visit and updating a visit. So for adding a visit, we know that the button that needs to be clicked is add. So this statement here is perfectly fine. We're going to now be having to pull in some information from our form. Now, this obviously is not really what we want. We need to create some new variables because there are some differences and considerations in our form or where our information is coming from that we need to consider. So I'm going to create some new variables. I'm going to create a variable called patient underscore ID. I'm going to create another variable which is called service underscore ID. I'm going to create another variable called visit underscore date. And I'm going to create another variable which is called status. And these things are going to be coming from our form. Now, in our situation, our data, the patient ID is going to be the patient ID that's being pulled in from the form. But if you looked at our form, let's go down to our form, you notice that our select or our drop down is named patient ID. So this means that we're going to be pulling in from or identifying each patient by the patient ID, first of all, and then using that patient ID, the options are going to be automatically populated here. But since our name is our patient ID, for the select, the dropdown, this is what we're going to use. And the same exists for the service. Our visit date is pretty much straightforward, and our status is pretty much straightforward. So let's go back up here and let's put this into action. So our patient ID is going to be trim, just in case. Okay, and inside of here, we're going to put $ underscore post and the name of the field, which is patient underscore ID. We're going to do the same here. And I think we can be a little lazy again. So let's be a little lazy. Control C and Control V here. Control V and also Control V. And yes, we can go ahead and put in our semicolons. We never want to forget those. And let's change from patient ID here to service ID. This one is going to be our visit date. So we're going to replace that. Visit underscore date. And this one is going to be our status. And these are the names of the input fields. So the status is going to be confirmed or pending or completed. So now we can go ahead and edit our, what happens if our fields are empty, what happens if our fields are not empty. So if our fields are empty, and we need to edit this out a little bit. So if our patient ID is empty, if our service ID is empty, if our visit date is empty, or type symbol, we need to add one more. If our status is empty, okay, then we're supposed to give an error that says all fields are required. And we already have that here. Okay. Now our SQL statement obviously needs to change. So our SQL statement is going to be insert. Let's just write it out. We need to write out the entire thing. Let's remove this. Insert into, what's the table? Visits. Okay. We're going to be inserting into the fields that are named patient underscore ID. And let's make sure of our field names in our table. So we have patient ID, service ID, visit underscore date, and status. So let's go back and put these in. So we're inserting into patient ID, service ID, visit underscore date, and status. But we're not done as yet. We simply just told the table and the fields that we're going to be putting in, but we also need to say what the values we're going to be putting in are. And these values obviously are coming from, let me just close my parentheses, go in here and put in single quotes or double, but since we're already using double quotes for the entire statement, we'll need to use single. The patient ID. Okay, thank you, Visual Studio Code, for helping us. Followed by the service ID, followed by our visit date, followed by our status. Okay, and close this. And I think that is our SQL statement. So of course we have our line here, which is going to push our SQL statement to our database. And finally, we have our message, okay? And in this case, our message is going to be that a visit was added successfully. So I'm going to change this to visit added successfully. So that is for us to, uh, you know, add. Now at this point, you can challenge yourself and pause the video and see if you can make the necessary changes to our update in order for our updating of our visit to be done. So as a challenge to yourself, pause the video and see if you can update your visits and get it to actually update the visits for you. Were you able to get it done? I hope you were. But if you weren't, let's take a look at what we need to do. So our first line is fine. Our update is fine. Remember, in each case, we are actually using the ID. So if we went back to our form, you would see that for ID is only for updating. So we are using the ID. So let's go back. And then we need to adjust these just as we did before. So which means that we need to take the same ones that we have up here, the ID, the service ID, the patient ID, the service ID, the visit date. So we're going to copy this and we're going to go here and we're going to paste it here. Okay. And then now we're also going to check for all of the same fields to see whether they're empty or not. So we're going to copy from our add and we're going to paste here. And then we're going to add on what we need for our ID being empty. So we're going to say empty, or if our ID field is empty, $ID, and close our parentheses, and we put our double pipe for the or. So if the ID is empty, let's scroll this up, or if our patient ID is empty, or if our service ID is empty, or if our visit date is empty, or if our status is empty, then it's going to produce a message. All fields are required, including the ID for updating. And here, we're going to change this to visit updated successfully. But we also need to change our update statement. Our update statement is incorrect. So I'm going to say update the visits table. We're going to set our patient underscore ID column to be equal to whatever the user has put in, which is the patient's ID. Okay. Patient's underscore ID. We're also going to change our service ID, service underscore ID, to be equal to whatever the user has put in, which is the service ID. We're also going to change our visit date, visit, because we're updating visit date, to be equal to whatever the user has put in, which is $visit date, comma. We're also going to change our status, so that would be status, to be equal to whatever the user has put in, which is status variable. And we're doing all of this where the ID is equal to the ID that the user has put in. And that would be our update statement. Let me format and save. Okay, our query is going to be pushed to our database using this line, and our message, we've already formatted it. So that is how we're actually going to be able to get this done. But if you try to use this at this point, it's not going to work as yet. I know the temptation may be there for you to go ahead and, test it out, but it's not going to work as yet because we have not populated our drop downs for patient and service. And also, um, although it's not needed for the updating, but our rows have not been included here. So let's go ahead and deal with fetching the information that's going to be used in our drop downs. So we're going to put a little comment right here below updating. We like to comment and make sure we know what we're doing. We're going to say now we're going to fetch the drop downs and visit records. So we're going to populate the drop downs and the visit records. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's deal with the drop downs first. Now, for the drop downs, we need to retrieve the patient and service names from their respective tables. And we also are going to use those very same results to build our drop-down menus dynamically. So what I need from the patients table is the ID and the names of the patients. And what I need from the services tables are the IDs and the services from the services table. So I'm going to create a variable patients, not patient ID, but patients. And I'm going to set this equal to our familiar MySQL underscore query. And now I'm going to unlock our database by passing the con variable. And then I'm going to pass through my query to select ID and name, okay, from our patients table. Okay, so I'm selecting the ID and name from our patients table. And then I'm also going to I'm going to create a services variable. And I'm going to set this equal to the same thing, MySQLi underscore query. And I'm going to pass it the con variable. And my SQL statement is going to be similar to this one, where I'm going to be selecting the ID and the name from, I'm copying and pasting here, our services table. So these two lines are going to be pulling the information that we need to populate our dropdowns. So let's go ahead and do that inside of our form. So inside of our form, I'm going to go to the patient dropdown first of all. And right in this area here, when my PHP code, my SQL code, goes and sends my query, these queries, into our databases, the results are going to be passed to patients and services variables. So, like you would have seen us do before for our tables, we're going to use a while loop to be able to take what the queries pull out from the database, convert it into an array, and display each row of information in the array as the options. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to start my while loop. I'm going to say uh, PHP. We have to open PHP tags because we're in the middle of some HTML here. While, okay, this is my while statement. And it's going to say, I'm going to create a single row of information or a single variable, sorry, to hold my array. So I'm going to call it P for patients. Okay. So while P is equal to my SQLi underscore fetch underscore a sock, which we know converts our stuff into arrays. And what is it converting into arrays? Whatever is in patients, because that's where the results are stored. So while this is actually while when the information is converted from into an array, it's put into our P variable. And then, colon, and I'm going to close my PHP tags. We also need to end our while loop. So I'm going to do a PHP end while here. So I'm going to say PHP end while. We need to end the while. Okay, semicolon. And I'm going to close it. So inside of my while loop, what are we doing? We are creating options. So I'm going to open my option here, put in an option. And the value for my option is going to be what it is that I am pulling out. So what am I pulling out here? Okay, I'm going to be echoing out elements from my array. So inside the value, I'm actually going to use a little PHP shorthand equal to, and I'm going to be echoing out my P array, which is going to be the ID from my P array. And then this is PHP shorthand, so I'm going to question mark, close this. Okay, looked very confusing a while ago, but it cleared up itself. Okay, so that's the value. So it means that the value that it's going to have is going to be the ID number of the patient, or the patient ID number. Okay, and then now the actual thing that's going to be displayed, because if I go to I go here, okay, and I'm going to have to log in here. So let's put in a little login. I'm logging in. Okay, obviously I don't have this page as yet, and this is the last page that we're going to be creating. Let me go to visits.php. And if I go to patient, you'll notice that we don't have any information here, but something definitely seems to have changed, because before it looked simply like this, but now we seem to have something going on here, which means that the patient IDs are already being pulled. So let's go back, right? And now we need to visibly or visualize what these are. So we're going to do another echo like this. And because we're lazy, I'm going to copy this shorthand here, and I'm going to paste it inside of what our option is actually going to be showing. But it's not going to be showing the ID, it's going to be showing the related name to the ID that is currently being shown. So that would be name. And if I go back to my form, if I go back to my form and I refresh and I go down here, you will see that it's now showing all of the names for the patients. Wow. So using the IDs and using the names from the table, by pulling them out and using them, we are actually getting these to show here. As a challenge to yourself, you can pause the video and see if you can do the same thing for our service right here. Were you able to get this done? If you were, congratulations. But if you weren't, let's see how we could do it. Now, again, it's okay to be a little lazy. And I'm simply going to copy this entire piece of code here. I'm going to copy it. Okay. And I'm going to paste it right here where it says PHP will populate this. And then we'll make the necessary changes. So we're not dealing with patients. What are we dealing with? Services. So quite simply, all we need to do is change our P to something like S for services, change our patients variable to services, okay? And we're going to change our P here to S for services, and also our P here from P to S. We are pulling the ID of the service and the name of the service, so we don't have to make any other changes. Let's go back to our form and see if the things that we enacted are working. And when I refresh, all of our services are now being populated. We don't have to do anything for status because these are hard-coded in. So right away, we have a nice complete engine for adding and updating our visit information. Let's see if it actually works. So I'm going to go here, and I'm not going to be adding an ID because I'm going to be adding a visit, sorry. So let's say for Maria Lopez, I'm going to add a service of a blood test. Maybe tomorrow, the 20th of the 4th of 2025. And I'm going to say pending, and I'm going to hit add visit. And it says visit added successfully. Let's go to our visits table And let us refresh. And we see that we have a visit pending for tomorrow, which is the 20th, a service ID of 3, and a patient ID of 2. Now, notice that we only have a bunch of IDs here, and we have no idea what these are other than just the IDs. But we do know that the person selected, something that they want to get done, or we selected something that we wanted to get done for Miss Lopez. Okay, none of the other tables are changing, but using the IDs, something has been added. So that means now that we need to be able to join some information from the various tables so that we can display all of this information down here. And to do this, we need to use something called a join. So I'm going to go back to my code, and in my form, you will see that I have visit rows will be inserted here. But in order to get the rows that need to be inserted, I need to go ahead and pull this information out of my multiple tables. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we're going to do that. So what I'm going to do is to go back into my PHP, and right below where we did our fetching of our dropdowns, we're going to put a little space here, and we're going to create a new variable called visits. And visits is going to be equal to MySQL. Oh, I'm botching this. MySQLi underscore query. You've seen that before. It's just above. We're going to pass it the connection variable. And then now we're going to be passing it something else. And what are we going to be passing it? Well, we're going to be passing it a query. Now this query, I'm going to make some space here because this query is going to be a little long because we're pulling information from multiple places. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be selecting the visitor.id. Now we can use something called aliases in creating our select statements or our SQL statements. So instead of going ahead and writing visitor or visit, sorry, .id, I can actually create an alias or aliases that I can use in order to pull information out of our tables. And SQL is intelligent enough to know what it is that we're referring to. So I'm going to pull the visit ID, visit.id. I'm going to pull the patient.name, that's what the P stands for. And I'm going to be saving it in our visit variable as patient underscore name. Okay, so I'm going to be doing that. Then I'm going to be pulling out our service dot name, and I'm going to be saving it in my visits variable as service underscore name. Then I'm also be going to be pulling out my visit dot visit date. Now I could very easily, instead of using V and S and V, I could have written the actual table name. Okay, but in this case we can use aliases, and that's very fine. So visit dot visit date, and I'm going to be also pulling visit.status. I need all of this inside of my table, right? Because if you look inside of my table, you see that I have the ID, I have the patient name, the service, the date, the status, and finally we have our actions. But we're not pulling action from our database. The actions table is, as you would have seen before, where we have our delete link, which we're going to be simply doing a little copying and pasting for. We've already done it several times. So I'm going to go back up here and we're going to finish up our query. So we've selected what we need. Okay, we've selected what we need. Oh, and we're going to be pulling, you're going to be pulling from from visits v, okay, and we're going to be joining, or we're going to say join patients. That's where we're going to let it know what all these v's and p's are. Join patients p on v dot patient underscore id, which is going to be equal to p dot id. We're also going to, oh, where did this come from? Where did this come from? P dot ID. Then we are going to join services S on V dot service underscore ID, which is going to be equal to S dot ID, which is service dot ID, which is our alias. And then we're going to order this by the visit dot ID in descending order. And that is our query. Okay, my SQLi is supposed to be my SQLi. Okay, all right. So let's break this down a little bit so we know what it is we just did. So in our code that we just wrote here for pulling information and storing it in visits, okay, this line visits equals MySQLi query with the con tells PHP to run this SQL query and store the results in a variable called visits. The select v.id, p.name as patient name, s name as service name, visit date, um, visit date, v status. This part can be broken down. v.id is the ID number of the visit from the visits table. p.name as patient name, this right here, gets the patient's name and gives it a nickname or an alias called patient name. S.name as service name gets the service name and calls it service underscore name. v.visitDate is going to get the date of the visit, and v.status will get the status of the visit. So that would be confirmed, pending, or whatever. Aliases like patient name or service underscore name are used to give the field a clearer name in PHP when we're displaying it later. Okay, the main table we're pulling from is visits, okay, and we're saying we're going to call it V for short, which is why we're able to call it V here. Okay, so we give it an alias V so we can reference its columns more easily later in the query. Join patients P on v.patient_id equals p.id will link the visits table to the patients table. We're saying look at the patient ID column in the visits table, find the matching ID in the patient's table, pull in that patient's details that matches the ID. And we also give patients an alias of P, okay, to shorten our references. Join services, just like before, we're saying also link the visits table to the services table where you're matching the service ID from visits to ID in services. Now we get service details for each visit. And then we're saying order by the visit.id or the ID field in the visit table in descending order. Okay, this SQL join pulls all the important information that we want. It pulls the visit info from the visits, it pulls the patient name from the patients, and the service name from the services. And it does this all in one query instead of requiring multiple queries. Okay, but we're not done. We're not done. We've actually pulled the information out, but we now need to use that information in our table. And we've done it before, but this one has a tiny difference. And we're going to go here. And in this case, we can actually, um, we can actually go and copy and paste from our previous. So let's say we want to pull one from services. So is services long enough? Let's use the one from patients. So I'm going to go to my patients table and I'm going to copy this here all the way to the end while. So we're going to copy our while loop and we're going to go here and we're going to paste it right here. And we'll just go ahead and edit that. So let's edit. So while we're not going to use row in this case, I mean, we could, but earlier on we used S and P when we were doing our patient and our services dropdown. So let's go ahead and let's actually just, follow that same trend. So since we're working with visits, we're going to change change this to V, and we're also putting the visits variable, which is what we just went through a while ago. And now, instead of row ID, we're going to be getting our information from V, okay, ID. We're also going to be getting our information from V, but it's not going to be name. What it's actually going to be from the information that's being pulled up here is we're pulling the patient name and then service name and then visit date and then status. And of course, we're going to be deleting based on the ID. So let's go back down here and let's implement this. So it's not going to just be v name, it's going to be v patient underscore name. It's not going to be email, but it's going to be v visit date, visit underscore date. It's not going to be row phone, okay, but it's actually going to be v status, I believe. Okay, status, sorry. And finally, in the actions, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, I have a typo here as well. In the 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm missing something. The service. So let me just copy this and put in our v service name, right? And then for the actions, we're going to have our delete. Now we're deleting. So we already created our file, but we haven't populated it or put any code into it. So it's going to be delete visit or delete visit.php. I'm going to rename that file in a second. Or let's just put delete visits without renaming. I don't want to confuse anyone. And we're also going to be deleting based on the v ID. Everything else stays the same. And this is our completed thing. So at the end of the day, we have created our engine, our PHP engine, which is going to be pulling all of our visit information and joining from the various tables. And we're putting that information into the table here. Let's go to our display and see if we have any changes. Okay, I don't want to continue just adding. And once I refresh, you will see all of our information that we're pulling out is here. Now, currently, if we click delete, nothing's going to happen. Okay, it does pass the information in the URL, but the deletion is not going to happen because we don't have a delete visits.php set up as yet. Okay, so let's do a little refresh here and let's go ahead and actually put in the necessaries for our delete visits. So we're actually going to copy our services delete. We're going to copy that and we're going to go in our delete visits and we're going to paste this here. And from, we're not deleting from services, we're deleting from visits, our visits table. And we also are going to send the user back to the visits.php page. So now, once we've done that and we've created our file, we can go back here and refresh. And let's say we want to delete Maria Lopez's blood test or this blood test for Maria Lopez. We can just click delete and we will see that it's deleted from here. And if we refresh here, we will see that Maria Lopez's blood test is also deleted here. So hope you were able to get through all of that and that your system works as expected. Good job hanging with it. In our next video, we're going to be building our dashboard and we're also going to be adding some additional user experience functionalities, some little odds and ends that are going to make our user experience a little better. So see you in the next video.